Derek Langston pulled into the parking lot of Sunrise Diner number 28 just as the morning rain started to fall harder, peppering his windshield with gray droplets. He sat still for a moment, letting the sound of the storm settle over him like a shroud. This wasn't how he envisioned spending his Tuesday morning, not as the CEO of a booming national diner chain. But today wasn't about titles. Today, he wasn't Derek Langston the executive. Today, he was just another customer. Wearing a faded hoodie, jeans, and an old cap pulled low over his graying temples, Derek blended in with the early crowd of regulars and blue-collar workers. The parking lot was only half full, but he could already sense the sluggish pulse of the morning shift inside. He glanced at his watch, 6:43 a.m. This particular branch had been on his radar for weeks. Employee satisfaction surveys had returned dismal results, with red flags about tip fairness, burnout, and, more troubling, favoritism among the management. But the corporate reports told a different story: stable performance, no urgent issues, maintaining customer traffic. It didn't add up. As he stepped out of the car and adjusted his cap against the drizzle, Derek's mind wandered to the anonymous comment he'd read just 3 nights before: "I cry every time I go home. I work double what others do and still can't afford my rent. Nobody listens." That was what brought him here, not a quarterly report or a dip in numbers. It was a voice. A cry. Someone, somewhere, was barely holding on. Sunrise Diner number 28 didn't look particularly different on the outside. Its cheerful yellow awning glowed against the overcast sky, promising warmth and hot coffee. But Derek had learned long ago that smiles meant nothing if they were painted over rot. He pushed open the glass door. A tiny bell jingled overhead. The warmth inside hit him like a wall, bringing the smell of sizzling bacon, burnt coffee, and cleaning solution. A young hostess at the front glanced up, her smile practiced and tired. "Welcome to Sunrise," she said with a hint of robotic cheer. "Table for one?" "Yeah," Derek said, keeping his voice gravelly. "Corner, if you got one." The girl, her name tag read Amber, nodded and gestured toward a booth near the window. "This one okay?" "Perfect." Derek slid into the seat and took in the room. The diner wasn't dirty, exactly, but it wasn't clean either. The menu board had streaks across it, and the utensils on his table didn't quite match. A laminated menu was slightly sticky to the touch. Amber left with a clipped nod. Moments later, another voice rang out behind him. "Coffee?" He turned to see a young woman with her blonde hair tied in a messy bun and deep shadows under her eyes. She wore the Sunrise uniform but moved with a pace far quicker than anyone else on the floor. "Yeah, please." She poured without asking about sugar or cream, then set the pot down and scribbled something on her pad. "Ready to order?" "Give me a minute." She nodded, already turning to rush toward another table. Derek watched her dart between booths, taking orders, refilling drinks, bussing her own tables. The contrast between her speed and the more casual loitering of 2 other servers, a lanky young man chatting near the soda machine, and a woman scrolling on her phone by the counter, was stark. That was the kind of thing you didn't see in reports. Derek sipped his coffee and let the bitter burn jolt him to full attention. The girl, Cassie, according to her name tag, returned a few minutes later, visibly out of breath. "Eggs and bacon. Toast." "Make the toast rye," Derek said. Cassie scribbled. "You got it." Her voice was polite, but the weariness leaked through. Before she turned, Derek said quietly, "You always this busy?" Cassie hesitated. For a second, she looked as if she might say nothing. But then, with a half-smile that didn't reach her eyes, she replied, "Only when I work." Derek raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" Cassie glanced toward the manager's office, a closed door behind the counter. "Let's just say not everyone has to hustle," she said under her breath. Then she walked off. Derek's pulse ticked up. This was what he'd come for. He pulled out a small notepad from his jacket and jotted down a few words. Cassie. Overworked. Favoritism. He didn't need much to begin unraveling the truth, he only needed to listen. Derek stirred his coffee slowly, watching the way the cream swirled into the black. Cassie was back on the floor, juggling orders like a circus performer, except no one was applauding. She moved quickly but with the heavy gait of someone carrying too much weight, both literal and emotional. As he waited for his food, Derek began counting. Cassie managed 7 tables. The guy by the soda machine, Eli, from his name tag, handled only 3 and moved at half the pace. The woman at the counter, Roxanne, served 2 and seemed more interested in her phone than the customers. The imbalance was clear. But it was more than that. Derek saw it in the way Cassie glanced over her shoulder toward the manager's office, as if anticipating being reprimanded for something that wasn't her fault. It was the subtle flinch, the tight smile, the way her eyes dropped to the floor when Doug Henderson, branch manager, finally emerged. Doug was a tall man with slicked back hair and the permanent expression of someone smelling something faintly unpleasant. He wore a too-tight dress shirt and carried a clipboard, though he never seemed to write anything on it. He walked around like he was doing inspections, but mostly, he stood and chatted with Eli, laughing, slapping him on the back, and even sneaking a French fry from his tray. Derek's breakfast arrived, piping hot and hastily plated. Cassie placed the plate in front of him. "Anything else?" she asked, her voice too calm for the dark circles under her eyes. "No, this looks great," Derek said. Then added, "How long you been working here?" Cassie blinked, caught off guard. "Almost a year." "You like it?" Cassie hesitated. "I like the customers." She didn't elaborate, but she didn't need to. Derek offered a small nod. "Seems like you run the whole place." She smiled weakly. "Sometimes it feels that way." She turned and walked off again, dodging Eli who was now laughing at something Doug had said. Derek's jaw tightened. Favoritism wasn't just speculation anymore. It was in full view. He finished his breakfast, watching interactions, taking notes. Amber, the hostess, got scolded by Doug for standing too long, even though she was the only one actively seating customers. Cassie took on another 2 tables when Roxanne said she had a headache and needed a breather. Doug waved her off without a word. Meanwhile, Eli strolled around like he was on vacation, and Doug let him. The tipping system was next on Derek's mind. He asked Amber quietly, when she brought his check, "Is the tip pool shared?" Amber lowered her voice. "It's supposed to be." "Supposed to be." She glanced around. "Doug decides how it's split. Sometimes it makes sense. Other times," she trailed off. Derek left a 20 on the table and stepped outside. The rain had stopped, but the clouds remained. He walked down the block to a parked rental car where his assistant, Renee, was waiting with a laptop. "Well?" she asked as he got in. Derek shut the door. "We've got a serious problem." He briefed her on everything: Cassie's workload, Doug's behavior, the suspicious tip distribution. Renee tapped on the laptop. "I'll pull the financials for that location again. Want me to interview the others?" "Not yet. I need more time inside. I want them to show their true selves. Doug is too polished when he knows he's being watched." Derek returned the next day. And the day after that. Each morning, Cassie was there. Each morning, she worked harder than anyone else. Each time, Derek picked up more pieces. He spoke to a dishwasher who confided that Cassie often clocked out late but was told not to log overtime. He learned Roxanne was Doug's cousin. He overheard Eli bragging about always getting the good tables. On Friday, Derek got his breakthrough. He caught Cassie on her 10-minute break behind the building, sitting on a milk crate with a cigarette she barely smoked. "You okay?" he asked. She gave him a tired smile. "Yeah. Just tired. He sat on the crate beside her, careful not to push too hard. You mentioned tips were low. You think that's because of traffic or something else? Cassie took a deep breath. I think, some people always get the good shifts. The good sections. And even when we split, the numbers don't match. I worked a 12-hour shift last weekend and brought home less than Eli did in 4. Derek frowned. That's not right. No, she said. But if you say anything, Doug says you're being difficult. Or lazy. Derek nodded slowly. You ever think about leaving? Cassie looked down. I can't. My mom's sick. And I'm the only one paying rent. That night, Derek returned to corporate headquarters and reviewed the surveillance footage from the past week. Everything he saw on-site matched what the cameras caught. Even worse, Renee uncovered that Doug and Ryan, his assistant manager, had been altering payroll reports to reallocate tips and block certain employees from promotions. The next morning, Derek called for a meeting. He didn't wear the hoodie. He didn't wear the cap. He walked into Sunrise Diner number 28 in a suit, unannounced, and asked all staff to come to the dining area. Cassie froze when she saw him. Doug stepped forward, his face paling. Mr. Langston, he asked, voice trembling. Derek didn't wait. Sit down. And then, calmly, clearly, and backed by evidence, he laid everything out. The unfair treatment. The rigged tip pools. The illegal overtime practices. The favoritism. The lies. Cassie watched in stunned silence as Doug and Ryan were stripped of their positions on the spot. The staff gasped when Derek turned to Cassie and said, starting next week, you'll be running this location. If you want it. Cassie's hand flew to her mouth. Your new salary will be double what you earn now, Derek added. And I expect you to build the kind of team you wish you had. Tears streamed down her cheeks as the room erupted in applause. Outside, the clouds finally broke. And for the first time in a long while, the Sunrise Diner lived up to its name. Undercover Boss orders breakfast at his own restaurant, Part 3. A month passed, and the transformation was nothing short of extraordinary. Derek returned to Sunrise Diner number 28 unannounced again, this time without disguise, and with quiet pride. He parked in the same spot, stepped out into the spring sunlight, and immediately noticed something different, laughter. Not the kind born out of sarcasm or tension, but genuine laughter drifting out of the diner's slightly propped door. He walked in and paused. The diner was brighter. Cleaner. The front counter gleamed, and the old, streaked menu board had been replaced with a sleek digital one. Fresh flowers sat in small glass jars at each table. There were still signs of a working-class place, steel napkin holders, worn booths, but the energy was different. Renewed. Cassie stood near the register, clipboard in hand, guiding a new employee with a mix of patience and clarity that most leaders needed years to master. Her uniform was crisp, her hair tied back neatly, and her eyes, once ringed with fatigue, were clear and focused. She spotted Derek and froze for just a second, then walked over, a wide smile on her face. Didn't think I'd see you so soon, she said, tucking the clipboard under her arm. I had a craving for rye toast, Derek joked. She chuckled. Well, you're in luck. We upgraded the rye. Derek looked around. You did more than upgrade the bread. Cassie's smile softened. I had help. The team's different now. We talked through a lot of the tension. Everyone gets fair sections. Everyone logs their hours. And the tips? Cassie tilted her head. We made it transparent. Shared by hours worked, customer feedback, and waited for difficult shifts. Amber actually helped redesign the model. Amber walked by at that moment, carrying a tray, and gave a friendly wave. She looked happier too, her posture lighter, her face more open. How's the team handling the changes? Derek asked, genuinely curious. They were nervous at first. But once they realized it was real, no more backdoor deals, no more threats, they started pitching in. Cassie's eyes shined. Even Eli came around. He apologized. He's actually trying. Derek raised a brow. Seriously? She nodded. He's not perfect, but I made him training lead for weekends. Structure helps him. Derek was quiet for a beat. Then he leaned in slightly. And you? How are you doing? Cassie paused, her smile faltering just a little, but not from sadness. From reflection. I sleep better. I laugh more. My mom's still sick, but I can pay the rent and afford her meds. Anne. I think I'm finally proud to walk through those doors. Derek nodded, his throat tightening. Before he could respond, a voice from the kitchen shouted, Cassie, we need another set of clean menus. I'll be right there, she called back. She turned to Derek. Do you want your usual table? I do. He sat near the window again, this time watching a well-oiled rhythm of service unfold. People moved with purpose, with mutual respect. Cassie's new assistant manager, a former hostess named Bryn, coordinated calmly behind the scenes. Halfway through breakfast, Derek saw something on the table that hadn't been there before, a laminated card that read. Our promise to you. At Sunrise Diner number 28, every plate is served with fairness, dignity, and care, both for the guests and the team behind the scenes. Manager, Cassie J. Derek smiled. He finished his coffee slowly, savoring more than just the flavor. It was peace. Closure. Progress. As he got up to leave, Cassie met him by the door. Thank you, she said. For what? For believing that what we do here matters. He looked at her for a long moment. It does. More than most people ever realize. He stepped into the sunlight, the bell on the door ringing behind him. For the first time in weeks, there was no storm overhead, just a warm breeze and the quiet certainty that something broken had been put back together stronger than before. And in the world of diners and coffee cups, sometimes, that was everything. 2 months later, Derek sat in his corporate office, sunlight pouring through the glass windows behind him. A framed photo of the original Sunrise Diner, taken the day it opened, hung just above his desk. Beneath it sat a stack of reports, folders, and a file with a gold label, Sunrise number 28, Internal Review. It wasn't just one location anymore. Since Cassie's promotion, something unexpected had started happening. Word had spread, not just among employees, but through online forums, anonymous tip lines, and social media. Stories of reform, transparency, and fairness at Diner number 28 had caught fire. Employees at other branches began quietly submitting concerns, about managers who cut hours illegally, about hostile environments, about unfair labor practices that had gone unnoticed. And Derek listened. He created a confidential hotline. He dispatched observers posing as customers. He personally visited 4 more locations undercover. What he found made him both furious and hopeful. The issues were real, but so was the potential for change. Cassie's leadership became the blueprint. She began training sessions for newly promoted managers, not just at her diner but across the state. Her voice, once tired and trembling, now rang with conviction. She spoke to staff from other stores, not as a symbol, but as someone who had lived their frustration, and climbed out of it. Leadership, she told one group in a converted conference room, isn't about power. It's about responsibility. You don't walk into a shift asking what your staff will do for you. You walk in asking what you can do to help them do their best. Her words echoed. And so did the change. Sunrise Diner number 14 in Tulsa implemented her tip-sharing model. Sunrise number 11 in Reno replaced their toxic manager and saw a 32% increase in employee retention in 1 quarter. And at headquarters, Derek started rewriting the company's internal ethics and training program, with Cassie on the task force. But with every step forward, resistance followed. Doug, now unemployed, filed a wrongful termination suit. News blogs ran headlines like, CEO overreaches in diner drama. Shareholders questioned whether focusing on employee equity would hurt the bottom line. It was during one particularly tense meeting with executives that Derek stood up, mid-presentation, and walked to the window. He looked down at the courtyard, quiet for now, the company banner fluttering gently in the breeze. "If we're not willing to stand up for the people who serve our food," he said, turning around, "then we don't deserve their loyalty. If we lose money because we stopped abusing overtime laws, then we're not running a business, we're running a scam." No one argued after that. 3 weeks later, Cassie received a letter in the mail. Embossed with the Sunrise Company seal, it read, "Congratulations. Effective July 1st, you are being promoted to Regional Operations Lead for Employee Equity and Standards. Your leadership, courage, and unshakable integrity have set a new bar for our company. We are better because of you. Derek Langston." She cried when she read it. Not because of the title, but because it meant her voice mattered. That weekend, Cassie returned to the original diner, not as a manager, not as a boss, but as a customer. She wore jeans and a soft cardigan and sat in the same booth where she'd once served Derek, oblivious to who he really was. Amber, now assistant manager, brought her coffee. "Never thought I'd see you on this side of the counter," she teased. Cassie laughed. "Feels weird." "You've changed things," Amber said, suddenly serious. "For all of us." Cassie looked around at the diner, still humming, still warm, and nodded. "We changed it together." In the corner, an elderly man spilled his orange juice. 2 employees rushed to help him, no hesitation, no finger-pointing. Just teamwork. Kindness. Respect. Derek's original vision had been to build a chain of diners that served good food quickly. But now, something bigger was growing, something that could redefine what it meant to run a business built on people, not just profit. Back at his office, Derek pinned a new photo on the wall, right next to the old black and white of the first sunrise. It was Cassie, standing in front of diner number 28, arm around Amber, both smiling, sunlight behind them. He looked at both photos, the past and the future. And he smiled. 1 year after that rainy morning when Derek first walked into Sunrise Diner number 28 Undercover, a very different kind of event was taking place. The Sunrise Annual Leadership Conference was in full swing at a hotel ballroom downtown. Gold banners bearing the company's logo hung alongside giant LED screens, and for the first time in company history, the opening keynote speaker wasn't the CEO. It was Cassie. Dressed in a navy blazer and white blouse, she took the stage with a quiet confidence that stunned the room. Hundreds of managers, cooks, servers, hosts, and executives listened as she shared her journey, not as a victim, but as someone who refused to stay silent in the face of inequity. "I wasn't special," she said. "I didn't have a degree. I wasn't on anyone's fast-track list. I was tired, broke, and scared of losing everything. But I showed up. And I worked. And when someone finally listened, everything changed." A standing ovation followed, not just from the crowd, but from Derek himself, seated front and center, his hands red from applause. After her speech, dozens of employees approached her with gratitude, stories, and questions. Cassie stayed for hours, talking to each one like they were the only person in the room. Outside the conference hall, a young server named Jordan nervously walked up to Derek. "Mr. Langston. I just wanted to say. I used to hate this job. But after hearing Cassie, I think I finally understand what it could be." Derek smiled. "Then we're doing something right." By the end of the weekend, the company had adopted a new slogan. Sunrise Diner, where people come first. It wasn't just branding. It was real. New policies were rolled out, clearer protections for employees, mandatory management training on ethics and inclusion, and a profit-sharing system tied to team performance rather than seniority alone. Cassie's influence continued to grow, but she never let the spotlight change her. She still walked into number 28 every Sunday morning to have breakfast with her mom, who was now in remission. They'd sit in the window booth, sipping coffee and smiling at familiar faces. One Sunday, Derek joined them. He brought a gift, a small, framed photo of that first day, when she brought him burnt coffee with trembling hands, unaware she was serving the person who would change her life. Next to it, he placed a new photo, Cassie, standing beside a sign that read, "Welcome to Sunrise Diner number 28, regional flagship for equity and excellence." Cassie blinked at the image, speechless. "It's not just your story anymore," Derek said quietly. "It's all of ours." She looked at her mother, then back at Derek. "Thank you for seeing me." He nodded. "Thank you for making me look." As the camera shutter clicked for one last photo, capturing the three of them together, CEO, manager, and mother, it felt less like the end of a story, and more like the beginning of something much bigger. Not just a diner. A movement. A sunrise worth waking up for.